Welcome to Pharaoh's Code, where the secrets of ancient history come to life. From the secrets of, yes, we all see ancient artifacts, but behind every artifact lies a wondrous story, wonders carved in stone. We uncover the hidden secrets of our past, one discovery after another. Subscribe and enter a world where time speaks. Titled The Catastrophe.
Around 600 BCE, the Athenian poet and statesman Solon visited Egypt.
During his visit, he met a priest at the temple of Sais in the north, who shared stories from ancient history, saying, "Many destructions of mankind have occurred and will occur again, caused by various reasons. The greatest of them are due to fire and water, while others, less severe, stem from countless other causes. That is why humanity must start over again and again. Each time, you must begin anew, with no knowledge of what happened in the distant past. This is part of what has come down to us."
A few years after this debate, a site was discovered far from the Sphinx, one that would change everything: Göbekli Tepe in southern Turkey. Göbekli means potbelly and Tepe means hill, so the name translates to Potbelly Hill in Turkish, likely describing the site's shape before excavation. Although the site was first identified in the 1960s, significant discoveries began in the mid-1990s, led by archaeologist Klaus Schmidt of the German Archaeological Institute. He uncovered nearly 60 stone pillars, some T-shaped, arranged in circles between 3 and 6 meters in diameter. Each pillar weighs between 10 and 15 tons, carved from a single stone with high-relief engravings.
Through radiocarbon dating of organic material found around the pillars, the site was astonishingly dated to 9,500 BCE, now the official date for Göbekli Tepe. This shocked everyone and baffled even the researchers themselves, because mainstream history held that the world at that time only had primitive nomadic hunter-gatherers, incapable of building any type of settlement or monumental structure. Yet building such a complex would require settled life, repeated effort, and a deep understanding of working with massive stone. It's worth noting that while the pillars may not be perfectly straight, their significance lies in their size, number, and extreme antiquity.
Stanford archaeologist Ian Hodder commented on the discovery, saying, "These pillars are massive, even though they're ancient. They turn everything upside down. It seems all our previous historical theories were wrong." The pillars were also covered in carvings of animals, lions, snakes, birds, scorpions, and interpretations of these symbols, whether astronomical or religious, are still under study. The site also contained a life-sized human statue, believed to be the oldest statue of its kind in the world. Interestingly, the statue shows the hands interlocked in front of the body, mirroring the design of the pillars, which also depict stylized arms in the same position. This detail is worth noting. We will refer to it again later. Göbekli Tepe is not a standalone site. 9 other locations with similar features have been discovered, all with T-shaped pillars. Although most are in worse condition and smaller in size, they belong to the same time period. This means that a settled, non-random society living in this region established all these sites. So far, only about 10% of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated. The rest remains buried underground. One more striking detail: the entire site was intentionally buried with stone blocks. These small stones are not from natural collapse or destruction. They were deliberately placed there. To protect the site and the pillars, one must ask, protect them from what? Let's leave that question hanging for a moment and shift our attention to Easter Island. Located in the heart of the Pacific Ocean, Easter Island lies over 4,000 kilometers away from the nearest landmass.
In the 18th century, Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen arrived at the island. His visit coincided with Easter Sunday, so he named it Easter Island. However, the island's indigenous people call it Rapa Nui, meaning Great Rapa.
The island is home to nearly 900 giant statues, some of which reach up to 20 meters or about 65 feet in height and weigh as much as 250 tons. It is not precisely known when these statues were carved, but academic consensus dates them between 1000 and 1500 AD, a relatively recent era.
What stands out is the large number of unfinished statues. Some remain in the volcanic quarry, either incomplete or finished but never moved. Even more striking are the statues that were clearly in the process of being transported when the operation suddenly stopped. It seems illogical to exert such tremendous effort and then simply abandon the task, unless something forced them to. Especially since this doesn't apply to just one or two statues, we're talking about hundreds of unfinished ones.
When Dr. Robert Schoch visited the island, something small caught his attention and sparked his suspicion about the timeline of these artifacts. The first thing that stood out to him was the shape of the statue's hands and fingers resting over their stomachs.
This is exactly the same hand gesture seen on the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, despite thousands of miles and supposedly thousands of years separating the two sites. Since the island is so isolated, it's difficult to dismiss this as mere coincidence.
Secondly, remains of a stone wall on the island resemble the architecture of Peru's ancient civilizations and the Valley Temple near the Sphinx in Giza, featuring massive interlocking stones. The similarities between ancient civilizations, by the way, are extensive and deserve detailed study. Regardless, the resemblance is far too strong to be dismissed as random.
Many believe that all ancient knowledge had a common source that spread from one region to another. At this point, I began to wonder if these statues could actually be much older than traditionally believed, perhaps even dating back to an ancient era, like the Sphinx and Göbekli Tepe, or at least some of them might.
Another key observation was geological. Many of the statues are deeply embedded in the ground, some buried up to their necks. This level of sediment buildup would take thousands of years to accumulate. 300 years wouldn't be enough, especially in the absence of sand dunes or wind-driven sediment. Instead, this type of soil layering occurs through rainfall. Water erodes the highlands and gradually deposits earth over time, eventually covering the statues entirely.
Another surprising detail. A statue housed in the British Museum is made of basalt, but there are no basalt quarries on Easter Island. This led to a new hypothesis. Perhaps the basalt quarry existed but was submerged beneath the ocean when sea levels rose, just as many ancient monuments have been swallowed by the sea around the world. Though this idea remains unproven, I am now working on a project to fund an underwater search for basalt quarries.
In any case, this line of thinking led Schoch to consider how many civilizations may have been wiped out by ancient catastrophes. While historical texts and myths have long hinted at such events, they were not fully understood. At the heart of this chain of global disasters, spanning all continents, is the Sun. The last ice age ended around 10,000 BC, a date that virtually all geologists agree on. But the real question is, what ended the ice age? At first, scientists believed the ice age ended gradually and peacefully, with a slight increase in global temperatures causing glaciers to melt and humans to migrate into the newly habitable northern regions. However, with modern tools, such as satellites, geological scanners and carbon-14 dating, scientists have gained access to data that was previously unavailable. One of the key techniques used today is analyzing ice cores. Expeditions drill deep into the ice in remote frozen areas and extract long cylinders of compacted snow and ice, which are then sent to laboratories. By analyzing the trapped gas bubbles inside the ice, scientists can study historical changes in climate and pollution. Most of these studies are conducted in Greenland and Antarctica due to their isolation from human activity. For instance, take this ice core sample, extracted in 2020 by the University of Bern from Antarctica. The data revealed that during the 1970s, emissions from copper smelting doubled due to industrial growth in North America. Starting in the 1950s, levels of lead in the atmosphere also increased. These findings confirm that climate and environmental conditions can be tracked with incredible precision through ice analysis, offering new insights into ancient and modern shifts in Earth's history. Due to the widespread use of cars and other means of transportation, radiation levels increased during the same period. Because of nuclear explosions conducted as part of atomic bomb tests and the arms race between nations, the amount of carbon also increased in the late 18th century. With the rise of the Industrial Revolution in Europe and related developments, institutions and organizations began conducting this type of research and publishing their findings. Hundreds of volcanic samples have been extracted, some as long as 3 kilometers. These samples were sectioned, preserved in refrigerated storage, and studied periodically. Through this process, researchers have been able to learn more about volcanic eruptions, wildfires, solar storms, and meteor dust. A great deal of information can be extracted, as these ice cores store data, allowing geologists and climate scientists to trace the Earth's climate history back as far as 800,000 years. Dr. Paul Laviolette, a specialist in climate studies, was one of the scientists who analysed and measured the earlier samples. In his book, Earth Under Fire, one of the few books to link climate studies with ancient texts and archaeology, he presented multiple pieces of evidence. Among them, between 9,000 and 11,000 BCE, at the end of the last ice age, a high concentration of the isotope beryllium-10 was found in extracted ice samples. Beryllium-10 is a radioactive isotope associated with solar activity formed in the atmosphere as a result of increased solar storm activity that bombards the Earth daily. This was the first strong evidence of beryllium-10. Another piece of evidence came from analyses conducted by geologists and climatologists in Brazil, Colombia, the United States, and Europe. They detected a sudden rise in global temperatures which caused wildfires, rock melting, and the death of many animal species. Using carbon dating, they determined that these fires and melting events occurred between 9,000 and 11,000 BCE. The question is, did all these events happen around the same time, even though they occurred in very distant locations? If so, there must have been a common factor behind them. The proposed common factor is the Sun. During that period, between 9,000 and 11,000 BCE, there was intense solar activity, including storms and flares. This solar activity is considered one of the main factors that accelerated the end of the Ice Age. It was followed by massive solar storms that caused rapid melting of ice sheets, which in turn led to a global rise in sea levels. Floods, storms, hurricanes, and tsunamis struck coastal areas across continents. Vast forests were destroyed, and hundreds of animal species went extinct. Only after hundreds or even thousands of years did things begin to stabilize. All of this led Laviolette and Schoch to believe that the Sun was likely one of the causes behind the destruction of Göbekli Tepe, and also the first civilization on Easter Island. Now we must return to Egypt to see if something similar occurred.
The survivors of the disaster died without leaving a single word about what happened.
There are 3 signs that a catastrophic event struck Egypt. First, there are a large number of destroyed structures, ruins that resulted not from war or conquest, but from destruction beyond human capability. We're talking about devastation that exceeds what humans can naturally cause. Second, there are other structures that were left incomplete due to a sudden halt in activity, even though they were close to completion. Third, there is a noticeable gap in scientific and technical knowledge. Things we once knew how to do, we no longer understand, and we don't know why we stopped doing them. These are the 3 main points, in addition to some ancient texts that speak of catastrophic events in the very distant past, which could be evidence as well. The Egyptian historian Al-Suyuti, who was born, raised, and lived in Egypt, once asked about the pyramids. Yet no one could give him a clear answer, even though they are the largest structures in all of Egypt. He said, "I believe the pyramids were built before the Great Flood, because if they had been built after it, people would have known more about them." He mentioned the flood because that's what he knew. But we can substitute that with any other natural disaster. So what caused the destruction of so many pyramids and Egyptian temples? Every pyramid in Egypt has suffered some form of total or partial destruction. For example, there are about 15 pyramids in Saqqara, yet only one still stands today, the Pyramid of Djoser. The rest have been destroyed. As for the pyramids of Abu Sir, they are all in ruins, just piles of stone debris. The scale of destruction is enormous. Geometrically, the pyramid shape is one of the most stable and durable structures. Its center of gravity remains low, making it extremely difficult to topple. So this type of destruction could only have resulted from a violent event, not just natural erosion or aging over time, especially considering the land. Ancient Egypt went through several natural events such as earthquakes and storms, but in this discussion we will see how the events that affected the pyramids are not from the recent past. They go much further back in time. Let's take an example. The Red Pyramid. It was once completely covered in casing stones, but those stones have been broken and removed. Only a small section at the base remains. This didn't happen recently. It dates back to ancient times. How can we tell? Because the pyramid stones themselves are eroded, clearly worn down over a very long period of time, especially considering that the pyramid is located in the desert of Dashur, an extremely dry region. It's evident that the structure experienced rainy eras that caused this level of erosion. Then there's the Bent Pyramid, which continues to cause confusion. The official story claims there was a mistake in its design that led to the change in angle, but this theory creates a bigger problem. If the pyramid was a construction mistake, then why weren't its stones reused for the next pyramid? And if it was truly a failed project, why were all its surrounding structures and even the Ka pyramid completed? Why would Sneferu depict himself celebrating in relation to it? Inside the pyramid, there are cracks, which led Sneferu's engineers to reinforce it with wooden beams. Of course, it's illogical for the original design to include both wood and stone. It's more likely that these wooden supports were added during Sneferu's reign as a precaution to prevent future collapse. In fact, modern studies have confirmed that the pyramid is in good condition today. Still, many of these questions remain unanswered, unless we consider the possibility of a catastrophic event. In that case, things begin to make more sense. The pyramid might have been built before such a disaster, which then caused the upper half of the structure to collapse. You can also observe brown patches on parts of the structure, as if it's decayed or corroded. As for the smaller pyramid behind it, it was completely destroyed from the outside, possibly due to an external blast that also caused internal fractures. Then, hundreds or thousands of years later, King Sneferu came and reinforced it with wood. A similar case is the Meidum Pyramid, which Sneferu also restored and reinforced with cedar wood. Just like the Bent Pyramid, it's strange that Sneferu's engineers would construct these buildings and simultaneously support them with wood, making the same design error twice. It's more plausible that Sneferu inherited damaged pyramids and repaired them, just as we do with ancient structures today. Look at the Pyramid of Userkaf. Both the pyramid and its surrounding complex have been entirely destroyed, reduced to rubble. It's considered so dangerous that access is prohibited. The same applies to the Pyramid of Teti, where engineers have emphasized the importance of visible restoration, including replacing stones and reinforcing the walls with wooden beams. This raises an important question. Why is the Step Pyramid of Djoser in the best condition of all the pyramids, despite being the oldest? It should logically be the most deteriorated. The chronological sequence of pyramid construction is problematic. As we've previously discussed, the pyramids of Giza and Dashur can't be the starting point of civilization. They reflect a peak in power and technological advancement. Most pyramids built after Menkora don't follow a logical pattern of human development. What came after should have matched or exceeded what came before, unless something interrupted this developmental sequence. That makes the common theory that the 4th or 5th dynasties stopped building large pyramids due to the high cost unconvincing. The people of pre-dynastic Egypt reached their architectural zenith with the pyramids of Dashur and Giza. Then a catastrophic halt occurred. Centuries or millennia later, the 4th dynasty emerged and restored parts of Memphis, the capital at the time. This is why Dr. Ahmed Fakhri stated, Menkaure died before completing his pyramid. His successor, Shepseskaf, took over and completed what was left unfinished, which is why we find that he quickly finished his father's pyramid complex using mud brick. At the same time, he didn't even attempt to build a grand pyramid for himself. This suggests that many of the pyramids of Saqqara and Dashur may have been constructed before the dynasties and later restored, as we've seen with the pyramid of Teti. In that case, the pyramid of Djoser, built by Imhotep, would actually be a more recent and luxurious restoration, not the original. Officially, there are 11 incomplete pyramids, such as the pyramid of Sekhemket in Saqqara and the Leia pyramid at Zawiat El Arian, the pyramid of Neferirkare at Abusir and the pyramid of Shepseskare. both constructions were suddenly halted. Although most of them were close to completion, the idea that construction was abandoned merely because of the king's death seems illogical. Naturally, the succeeding king would have continued building them unless the abandonment happened in much earlier times. It's also well known that many temples were built atop older ones, and stones from earlier temples were reused in constructing the newer ones. This happened, for example, in Dendera, where we find a wall relief that speaks of King Pepi's discoveries, as well as a papyrus from the time of the followers of Horus carved into a wall of the Dendera temple. The same occurred in Abydos, where Seti I himself mentioned using stones from an older temple to build a newer one, which led to the demolition of the earlier temple. Had those older temples remained intact, they would have been preserved as they were. For instance, the Osirion in southern Egypt is extremely ancient, with massive broken stones in its centre. The site has undergone several restorations, even during the Roman period. Historically, the surrounding area includes structures dating back to the First and Second dynasties, so when we find a very ancient area, it's logical to assume it could be even older. This is especially true when we consider the treasures from the First and Second dynasties, which show that pre-catastrophe sites in places like Tel Basta were reused. Buildings in that region are made up of about 90% solid stone. The oldest inscription found there dates back to the reign of Pepi II, which suggests the area's history goes even further back. There is no doubt that many restoration efforts were made by the dynasties, only for these restored sites to be later destroyed by acts of sabotage. So what exactly happened? A collection of texts written during the reigns of New Kingdom kings Tutankhamun, Seti I, Ramses II and Ramses III tell a story known as the Legend of the Destruction of Mankind. These texts describe how Ra, the sun god, became enraged with humanity because of their actions, and so he sent Sekhmet to punish them. The Arabic translation of this story was done by Professor Abdullah Salem, and the full version is available in the references of the video. But here are some key excerpts. Ra, who created himself, rose and reigned over all mankind and the Netjeru, gods. Then humanity declared their hostility toward Ra. Ra said, "The humans who emerged from my eye are plotting against me." Nun said, "Send your eye to punish them." When the people felt the punishment approaching, they fled to the desert. Ra said, "Look at them, fleeing to the desert, terrified of what I will decide." And so the goddess, Sekhmet, went and slaughtered the people in the desert. Thus Sekhmet was born. Ra then said to Sekhmet, "Does the sun's heat cause pain? Fear sometimes stems from pain. Yes, I wanted to destroy them all, but I didn't. Now I no longer care about their small number." Then Ra ascended into the sky. The people were stunned and returned to the land they had fled. Ra then declared, "I am Ra. I am the flame. I am the spirit of fire." The text clearly describes a solar catastrophe that led to the near extermination of humankind, with only a few survivors. Since this story was recorded in Egypt, it's logical to assume that Egypt was one of the regions affected by this disaster. Of course, we could dismiss the tale as mere mythology or a symbolic story, but are myths just fantasies that never happened? Or do they preserve events retold later in the form of stories? Surely there must be some truth to them, otherwise they wouldn't have survived across generations. This myth was recorded in the tombs of 4 different kings. Karen Armstrong, a scholar of religion and human heritage who studied many myths, wrote in her book A Short History of Myth that text appears to be cut off here, but she likely challenges the idea that myths are purely fictional. Another similar story appears in Coffin Text 316. It tells of a conversation between Ra and the Eye of Horus, the all-seeing force. This eye existed as the flame of the sun, which Ra ordered to cast its fire upon his human enemies. No one could survive or resist. It brought suffering and death. This text comes from the Middle Kingdom. In both versions, the eye is what ignited destruction. In the first, it is Sekhmet, Ra's eye. In the second, it is the Eye of Horus. That's why we believe this catastrophe has deep ancient roots and was retold across different periods. Solar storms may have killed many people in a very ancient Egyptian era, and the story continued, passed down in the form of written texts, inscriptions, and oral traditions. By the end of the dynastic period, these tales had become permanent points of interest for the Greeks. Philosophers and scholars came to Egypt to study and learn. Knowledge was transmitted from Egypt to Greece at that time. It was then that Solon the Athenian visited Egypt and spoke with the priests of the Temple of Sais. They told him of past cataclysms, the greatest of which were caused by water and fire. Disasters erase the memory of past ages, he said. Each time you have to start from scratch, unaware of what happened in earlier eras. He mentioned one of these disasters, saying,
One day Phaethon, the son of Helios, burned everything on earth.
Helios in Greek mythology is equivalent to Ra in Egyptian mythology. His son Phaethon parallels Sekhmet, who burned the earth and killed humans. Remember, when the priest told Solon this story, he might have used the names Ra and Sekhmet, which Solon translated into Helios and Phaethon, understanding that the priest was referring to them symbolically.
This myth is, in fact, a tale about a massive fire that destroyed everything on earth. That's why this narrative kept repeating for thousands of years. The story of mankind's destruction by the sun, which delivered the first blow.
Paul Laviolette stated that such solar disturbances could trigger other catastrophic events, like coastal flooding, hurricanes, devastating storms, and periods of darkness. So, are there any other signs of such events?
At the Ismailia Museum, there is a stone sarcophagus from the Ptolemaic period, found in the city of El Arish, bearing inscriptions in very poor condition. Despite the damage, these inscriptions tell a long story about an ancient Egyptian deity. When we talk about the age of the gods, we might be referring to the pre-dynastic period.
The text describes a disaster, a destructive storm and widespread fires that occurred during the reign of the gods Shu and Geb. Shu represents air and wind, and Geb represents the earth. The text reads, "The earth is in great distress. There was great turmoil in the house of Shu the wind. It ascended to the sky. There was no way to leave the palace for 9 days, and during these 9 days of chaos, a fierce storm raged so intensely that neither humans nor gods could see the faces of their brothers. This means that both humans and gods were unable to see each other due to the ongoing storm's intensity and darkness." The text continues, stating that after this event, Geb's body was burned, meaning the land was scorched, and he was treated until fully healed.
It's important to note that the text mentions both Neteru, the gods, and humans. What's the difference? Humans refers to ordinary people, while the word Neter, or NTR, is used to describe deities and the forces of nature, like the wind, earth, sun, and moon. It's also used to describe people of exceptional intelligence, including kings, the followers of Horus, and demigods who ruled during that period.
It was a common belief among the ancient Egyptians during the dynastic era that those who ruled before them were demigods due to their extraordinary power and intelligence. Dr. Ahmed Fakhri noted, "The Egyptians later viewed the rulers of that era with special reverence and referred to them as demigods. Just as we today might view someone like Albert Einstein, Einstein was a genius in physics. Can we metaphorically call him the god of physics or its master? Calling someone the god of physics doesn't mean they created physics, but that they reached a level of understanding so high, the title fits metaphorically." Similarly, in the later dynastic periods, Imhotep, the vizier of King Djoser, who was also Djoser's architect and physician, was elevated to the rank of a deity, due to his revolutionary use of stone in construction and his genius in both architecture and medicine.
He restored the statue, which had been painted, and ordered the missing section, 7 cubits about 3.7 meters in length, to be carved at the back. He came to witness the lightning strike at the location of the sycamore tree, whose branches were damaged when the Lord of the Heavens descended upon the site of Horus in the horizon. That is the translation of the text. Dr. Salim Hassan commented on this inscription, saying, If we believe the carvings, we must credit Khufu with restoring the Sphinx after it had been damaged by lightning. This kind of damage could only be caused by a direct blow from a heavy object propelled with terrifying force. On the Sphinx's back, there is a visible mark indicating a fracture. It's 4 meters long, exactly as described on the inventory stela, so it is quite possible the Sphinx was damaged by a lightning strike. Based on the statements of both Dr. Robert Schoch and Dr. Salim Hassan, it is likely that lightning struck the Giza region and could have played a role in destroying much of the outer casing of the pyramids. It's clear this was part of a larger catastrophic event.
No disaster ever wipes out everyone. Some people perish while others survive. This brings us to the words of Yes, I intended to kill them all, but I didn't. Now I no longer care about their small numbers, and so the burden of telling the story falls to the survivors. If a story is left untold, it will be lost forever. This brings us to a critical observation made by the priest to Solon. The survivors of the catastrophe died without leaving behind any written record.
Another study was conducted by a joint geological mission from the Universities of Geneva, Philadelphia, Cairo, Aswan, and others. They examined the Nile Valley and the surrounding dry valleys, as well as parts of the Western Desert. They dated some sediment deposits found in the area. The study's summary stated, "The inhabitants of the Nile Valley migrated in large numbers away from the river between 8,000 and 8,500 BCE, and they returned around 5,000 BCE. The reason for this migration remains unknown. According to the study location, the people of the Nile Valley had lived there since around 18,000 years ago. But for some unknown reason, around or before 8,500 BCE, they settled in the desert and stayed there for roughly 3,000 years. They then returned to the Nile Valley in 5,300 BCE, marking the beginning of the Helwan culture, which started around 5,000 BCE. According to academic history, Dr. Abdullah Zaki, one of the researchers, said this migration was due to violent climate changes around the Nile Valley, which caused storms, floods, and heavy rains. The region became uninhabitable, and so the people moved to the desert and settled there until conditions around the Nile Valley stabilized. Is there really a connection between Atlantis and ancient Egypt? Unfortunately, modern sources, whether books or documentaries, have mistakenly placed Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean. To evaluate this matter objectively, we must return to the original source of the story.
Before exploring other sources, Atlantis was first mentioned in 2 books titled Timaeus and Critias. These works are a collection of dialogues by Plato with his students about subjects like the origin of the world, Greek beliefs, elements of the universe, and more. Among the topics discussed is the story of Atlantis, passed down from Solon, who visited Egypt and heard the tale from its priests. It was said that a lineage of great and powerful kings emerged and ruled Atlantis and the surrounding lands, including Egypt, Libya, parts of Europe, and Italy. The territory of Atlantis was described as being larger than Asia and Libya combined, and it had reached a remarkable level of power and advancement. It was also mentioned that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Heracleion, later identified as the Strait of Gibraltar between Spain and Morocco. According to the story, Atlantis was destroyed by a catastrophic disaster. Plato stated that this destruction happened about 9,000 years before Solon's time. He also included various other details, such as descriptions of its cities, roads, and rivers. Because of these accounts, most scholars agreed that Atlantis was located in that region. However, no geological evidence has ever supported the existence of a sunken island there. The area has been thoroughly searched multiple times using sonar, expeditions, imaging, and satellites, but no trace of anything that size has ever been found. Since no substantial evidence has emerged, Atlantis has been considered fictional. Academically, Atlantis is defined as a mythical island whose story was entirely invented by Plato.
Well, I approach Plato's tales about Atlantis just as I do those of Herodotus, Strabo, or Al-Makrizi, or any other ancient historian or traveler. I neither fully reject nor entirely accept them. It's likely that the authors mixed fact with fiction due to the limited tools available in their time for verifying information. For example, there is a gap of about 6 generations, roughly 200 years, between Solon's visit, when he heard the story from the Egyptian priest, and Plato's time. During that period, the information could have been significantly altered or distorted. I believe the location of Atlantis may have been misunderstood due to errors in translating Plato's text from ancient Greek into English. In fact, many researchers have begun to dismiss the idea that it was in the Atlantic Ocean and have started looking elsewhere. The hypothesis I will present now is my personal viewpoint, though it may resemble others. I propose that Plato's Atlantis was actually prehistoric Egypt before the dynastic period. Let's repeat. When Plato told the story of Atlantis, he was in fact telling the story of ancient Egypt, whether he knew it or not. I will now explain the evidence that could support this theory. First, nothing has been found in front of the Pillars of Heracles, which is the Strait of Gibraltar. Is it possible that Plato meant different Pillars of Heracles? There is in fact an island with temples and a city built on it. Herodotus wrote about it, saying a great temple was built there to commemorate Heracles' visit, and that the city came to be known as the City of Heracles, replacing its original Egyptian name, Thonis. Strabo also precisely located this city. The city of Heracles, or Heracleion, is situated at the mouth of the Canopic branch of the Nile. Finally, at the end of the video, add a closing message thanking the viewers for listening and encouraging them to follow the Pharaohs Code channel and watch future videos. Subscribe, like, and comment.